Hi, it's just a quick video. I really like this person who does this channel, A Call for An Uprising, and he does some excellent videos, and he is a fantastic guy. But I do just have one issue with him, because, you know, he's totally against abortion and calls it murder, which I think in the case of late abortion certainly is, and I don't support late abortion unless the circumstances are really extreme, and in which case, you know, as far as I'm concerned, the pregnancy needs to be, the fetus needs to be humanely euthanised and should be given a name, you know, once there's full brain activity, because then that person is an individual, and it's full brain activity that determines the point of death, you know, the difference between life and death. A body can be alive, but if the brain's not working, if the person's brain dead, then you turn off the life support machine. So I've made a point here which I hope he won't take as criticism, because it isn't, but I think it's a very important point, and that's why I've decided to share it. Abortion is about a woman's rights, especially if she's been raped or pregnancy will damage her health, or if there's severe risk of a late miscarriage. This world cannot have it both ways. Women are not just baby manufacturers. As an impoverished female, abandoned by your partner, and in a world where poverty equals less power to care for and protect your child from crime and pedos, would you choose to go through with an unwanted pregnancy? I'm totally against late abortion, but there are many well-loved and cared-for children out there who were born because early termination of an unwanted pregnancy gave mum time to establish herself in a profession that allows her to raise a child with dignity. Personally, I would rather not be born ever again, except to genuinely loving parents. If my soul has to go through 100 terminations before birth, I'd rather die 100 times than suffer my childhood and life 100 times over. In fact, I would never want to be born again to endure and witness such horrors as I've experienced in this world. No, there is nothing in the Bible against termination of a pregnancy, no mention, and yet we know from history abortions have been performed throughout every era. You are correct, though, that this present sick system has normalised it, just as it normalised slavery and denial of women's rights, and those who gained most power and wealth via those crimes have established a world where women and children are still very oppressed and marginalised. We still tolerate the legal definition minor / lesser human in relation to a child. Women still earn the least pay, own the least property, and have the least influence and power. The woman works hard to create and birth and raise a child, who on growing up will earn profits for a corporation. What does she get out of it? The joy of looking after a child while working and struggling to pay bills, and most of the time relying on a child carer. It is a thankless task bringing a child into this world. No wonder so many mums are falling into postnatal depression. 2 among my circles of friends have committed suicide not long after giving birth, both by hanging. I hope you will broaden your perspectives on matters you are not as a male, yet fully versed and experienced in, and only because this sick world has traditionally conspired to negate and ignore the issues. Women need emotional support after giving birth. Women need emotional support throughout their lives. Women are generally more emotional than males, and for too long a woman's emotional needs have been judged as a sign of weakness by male power, a power calling itself a patriarchy, when in truth it is an oligarchy. Too many women are suffering isolation and loneliness after giving birth. Too many women have suffered sexual abuse that causes PTSD. Too many women are psychologically and emotionally crippled in this uncaring, non-empathic world. Now, I've put a link in this, and this is the link, and it's written by an American who's alarmed, because in Britain because we've got an NHS, they track all the deaths of new mums, postnatal deaths of mothers, new mothers, and the leading cause of death, suicide accounted for 28% of maternal deaths. Okay. These are the reasons for death before and after pregnancy. And the majority of maternal suicides are violent deaths. As I say, the two women in my circles of friends who I didn't have any direct contact much with those people other than on an acquaintance level, had both killed themselves by hanging, which is a particularly brutal form of suicide. And one of those women had another child as well. She left a 3-month-old baby and a 4-year-old child behind. And it is a terrible thing, just to hear about it even, that children are left without a mother, and this cannot be normal. It is not a normal thing, and I very strongly feel that it is due to the world that we live in and the fact that women do after giving birth. I know I went through it myself when I was 7 months pregnant, and suddenly just got really scared and thinking, what am I doing bringing a child into this world? What am I doing? What on earth am I doing? It's a horrible world. Why am I bringing a child into this world? What can I say? And I do know one person who, the family was suddenly impoverished after redundancy, and then there was, a relation split, and, the teenage son couldn't afford college fees, and was struggling to find somewhere to live, and he was 18 years old, and he phoned his mum up and said to her, why did you bring me into this world just so I could have no money, no job, and nowhere to live? And I think he had a valid point. And so, I'm not saying that people in poverty should not have a child, because if they've decided to bring a life into this world, that's something good that they've done. They've not done something bad. But I do understand that some people just could not face that, could not face witnessing their child being at risk, because they're too aware of what's out there, and they don't feel happy bringing a child into the world unless they know they can give that child as much protection and stability and love as they could possibly give to that child. Now this, the person that's written this article, she says, what can be done? I can't help but fear very little is being done, particularly within the US, where maternal deaths are not tracked or reported as consistently or meticulously as they are in the UK. The 1997-1999 report recommends that all women should be asked early in their pregnancy about a previous history of a serious psychiatric disorder, and that management plans should be in place with regard to the high risk of recurrence following delivery. Given the alarming incidence of postpartum depression and post-traumatic stress disorder, which, as I say, So many little girls, I mean, so many children, not just little girls but little boys, but the majority of girls, especially in their teenage years, will have suffered sexual abuse. You know, and again, this is something that's trivialised and is made, oh, you know, they'll get over it, but they don't. They're growing up with post-traumatic stress disorder, and naturally that will impact them, especially when they brought a child into the world, because it all of their suffering, their own suffering, they'll be reminded of. Their mind will be telling them, this is what you've now got to protect this child from, and if they don't feel capable of that, they can't. They just can't cope with the responsibility. And often these things do not come immediately to the fore. You know, that's when they will, when you're in a weakened state, like just after giving birth. You know, the mind becomes more vulnerable to reliving these type of events. I can't help wondering whether birth interventions are also a contributing factor in these tragic maternal deaths. And with more and more women settling far away from their mothers and sisters, I fear that too many women enter motherhood isolated and without the support and encouragement they need. There's no doubt about it. Mothers need far more emotional support. You know, and again, that's exactly the point that I've made in what I've said, is that we do live in a non-compassionate world. It's a very highly competitive world, and there's very little room for compassion in when you're trying to win a competition. Okay, it's people lying by the wayside, injured and still then they're just out of the race, aren't they? You just keep going, don't you? Because you're still in the race. If you stop to help them, then you're not going to win the race, are you? But everybody who wins that race discovers that the entry fee of the race in the first place is their soul. Okay, so once you've won, that's it. Your soul's forfeited. Because you've had to live without compassion. You've had to ignore. And these will all weigh on your conscience. And that is why Jesus came with forgiveness on the time, for the time when people start to wake up to reality that we're not supposed to live in a competition. Patriarch is not he isn't a father, he's an oligarch. Because an oligarch does not create the kind of world where women are having to have mass abortions and are committing mass suicide after giving birth to a baby. Because we're not raising psychologically healthy human beings here. We're raising damaged human beings. And especially women are being damaged and crippled by the judgments of this society. Even to this day, women feel embarrassed about their periods. Why? Why is that? It's a fundamental feature of life. If we didn't have periods, there'd be no children. Clearly, we need more research into these disturbing trends. But given that our American maternity care system has shown little regard for the rising maternal mortality rate, I wonder whether anyone even cares enough to dig deeper into this problem. Or is it a matter of whether anyone is brave enough to ruffle the feathers that would inevitably be ruffled if they were to let the skeletons out of our maternity healthcare closet? Until a thorough and coordinated effort is put forth by doctors, midwives, psychiatrists and communities, I fear that at-risk women will continue to fall through the cracks, suffer alone and give up hope. A few may be saved by in-tune family or friends, like my sister-in-law, but how many will continue to be lost? Far too many to be sure, and I can't believe I never knew until now. what they're doing in Britain, single mothers who are diagnosed with postnatal depression, social services come and remove the baby before they even leave the hospital. And a lot of those women do go on to commit suicide. Now, whether or not they would have committed suicide had they been given help, you know, instead of helping them, they're removing the babies off them. You know, and you know, and this is why, well, despite my thing, you know, my disagreement on the issue of pregnancy termination with call for an uprising, I do fully support this channel, you know, and have a lot of respect for him, because he is exposing very, very serious child abuse, and, you know, demanding that something is done about that. And this is what I mean, the kind of world where things like this can happen, you know, where things like Pizzagate and Hampstead can happen. And, you know, the fact that in Britain women are having their newborn babies removed from them by social services and then forcibly adopted, they never see that child again. And then we hear of 2 British children that 2 social workers bring babies into their cult, into their father's cult, who are then slaughtered and eaten. And then you look at the production, who's producing these babies? Oppressed, impoverished women who then fall victim to postnatal depression because they brought a child into a child they feel nothing but love for in an unloving world. And then they're taking those babies, you know, they're feeding off the problem. That's what they do, the vampires. It is a vampire system. And as I say, the light of universal truth, it will turn the vampires to dust. But we need to lose the judgments. We need to stop judging each other now. We've all had to survive somehow in this sick, disgusting world. We've all had to find out the truth for ourselves. Nobody has come and handed it to us on a plate. People like A Call for an Uprising, you know, is helping. And we need to start giving these people more support and listening more to what they say and giving them the same credibility you'd give to a major media outlet. So, like I say, although I have this one thing about, you know, claiming that an abortion is murder, that if it was murder, it would be ever written in the Bible that it, you know, something about it. Jesus would have said something about it, but he doesn't. He talks about poverty, he talks about children, but there's no mention, you know, of termination. And women were terminating pregnancies in those times. In fact, girl babies were being buried in the sand at birth. So but like I say, many people see termination of an unwanted pregnancy as a kindness, because it is so cruel for a child to be born to a mother that's got mental health problems, who can't look after her child, or who can't love her child, because she's in a world that a child is a huge burden that's placed on the, you know, that most responsibility is placed on those who have been made weakest by this system, those who've been most heavily judged against, those who have literally been slaves. For centuries, women the females were slaves to men, to male desires and male ideology, so called, except it isn't male, it's just oligarchical nonsense. That's what it is. But they pretend to be the Father, but no, because where is our Father? As Jesus told us, in heaven. Why? Because the true man, because the man on this earth psychologically is not allowed to grow beyond teenage level. He's a youth. And the woman, really psychologically, is still at the age of 12. And even at 12 years old, she's got more understanding about her. Because she has to bring the next generation into the world. And it's only when the male connects with the female needs that then they can mutually empower each other and grow up. And that's precisely why this oligarchy conspires to stop that, cut them down before they grow. Because it knows it could never survive if the male had compassion for the female. He would refuse to take part in a competition that meant babies and children were being murdered and sexually abused, that allowed and facilitated that. He just would not take part in it. Because it fundamentally goes against our human nature. But no, we've been programmed to grow up in these constructs. They're Roman constructs. It was only in antiquated ancient Rome where women were really subservient, that then infected other nations. Even Israel became like that. But in most countries, before those countries were invaded and governed by Rome, became Roman colonies, and later British colonies, who Britain followed exactly that same Roman blueprint to establish its empire. In most countries, women had rights, women had other women around them all the time. They had a large sistering gathering. Any pregnancy, there'd be lots of women coming to see them, helping with the other children, helping them clean up. Oh, it's a week rest for her, in our communities. But we do know, this is what I mean, we're not living in a natural society. We are being raised like cattle on corporate farms, and this so-called intelligence that governs us has absolutely no idea of what a woman really is and what her true needs really are. And as I say, a woman's compassion, her emotions have been judged as a weakness. A weakness that man must stamp out in himself in order to be the main. A successful, oligarchical male construct. And we do need to abandon that. And the men do need to abandon it. It doesn't matter how old you are. You could be 80 or 18. You're still a youth. Because this world does not allow us to use our brains, to expand our minds, to expand our consciousness. We all know completely that a miscarried child, a miscarried pregnancy or a termination, that soul is absolutely pure. It will go straight to heaven. But if it's born disadvantaged in this world and ends up becoming a rapist and a murderer, which would a true mother choose for their child? For the soul of their child to go straight to heaven, or to spend a life being enticed into crime and committing crime or being abused or suffering abuse. And it's alright saying that, you know, once you're pregnant, you've got to have that child. Well, but then at the same time, this world is saying, but we've not got to provide for that child. What? No, there's something very, 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 very cockeyed about the whole establishment and this whole idea that women can just be relied on to willy-nilly produce the next generation, go through all the hard work, suffering, emotional pain and anguish it takes to raise a child who can then just turn around and say, bye-bye, mummy, I'm off to go and earn X amount of profits for the corporation now. And she's paid for that kid's education, the healthcare, clothing, you name it. And so what? Is the corporation going to start coming giving the money for the child? No, you see, that's what I mean, because the system is fundamentally wrong, because money cannot compensate for human compassion. And a compassionate world provides for its children. Children are not born in poverty. Parents aren't forced to live on a minimum wage. You know, they're not forced to pay extortionate sums for education and healthcare. So the very brightest children aren't getting an education, they're becoming criminals instead, or abuse victims, or just struggling and suffering through life because the parents had no money to send them to college. But meanwhile, a lot of quite stupid children who aren't that bright are getting an education, are getting into very powerful professions and abusing their powers because they're not intelligent. And, you know, I'm not saying that all the children of wealthy parents are unintelligent, but what I am saying is that neither can we say all the children of poor parents are unintelligent children, and we're losing out on what those children have to offer because of the way this world works. And so, you know, I mean, hats off to call for an uprising, and I hope that this video has helped to clarify this issue, because we can't keep rocking the boat from one side to the other. No, abortion should be allowed. No, abortion shouldn't be allowed. It's not about whether women should or should not have an abortion. It's about a child's rights and the quality of life and the risks involved in any pregnancy. Okay? And it is about the level of care that this world is providing to its women and children. And how, you know, we don't even teach our young how to raise, how to look after a baby. We don't teach them of a toddler's needs. Boys aren't growing up learning about how they will have to deal with a pregnant wife, a pregnant partner. It is a total mystery. How can that be? How can that be? And especially because, you know, families are smaller, and so children aren't learning. They aren't learning. I grew up the eldest of 6 children. My whole life was spent looking after babies and children. You know. We learned. I had lots of cousins. We all played together. We learned to interact. But, you know, and I think this is why the paedophile psychology has particularly come to the fore now, because it is a reflection of our tiered education system where children are taught in specific age groups. And when you've got children who come from only one child family, or a 2-child family where there's big age gaps or no age gap barely at all, and they grow up isolated from children of other ages. They're taught inherently to, you know, look down on younger children. Oh, you're a bit more important because you're a bit older now. And when you get older, when you become an adult, then you will be important as an adult. But at the moment, you're only a minor human being. Children are told, they hear the word minor. It means minor. Look the definition up. It means unimportant, lesser. You're just a minor. In fact, the smaller you are, the less important you are, the less significant you are. And you know, these type of imbalanced judgments do trigger psychosexual responses in people. And as I say, you know, this is a very, very, very serious problem. Suicide, the silent thief of mothers. And it's very, very disturbing. You know, this is the person who wrote this. So, you know, I do ask people to lose the harsh judgments, think again about the issues. Remember, you know, Einstein was exactly right. All things are completely related. All things are. And you can't take away a woman's rights for centuries and centuries on the strength of a misinterpretation of a story. Go and look at my Return to Eden video and understand how that story has been misinterpreted. You can't do that for centuries and centuries and build up a whole economic power structure and system on the strength of it, and that includes slavery as well, of both men, women and children, and expect anything normal to come out of it. And in that world, you know, bad things will be a kindness, you know, like the idea of an abortion will be a kindness. But just the fact that women are getting pregnant, that so many men do force themselves on women. And as I say, when they're on their own, they're very, very vulnerable. And there are far too many unwanted pregnancies as a result of lack of protection and lack of dignity and rights for women and children. There's just no respect. And in my other video, Trump the Law, I've explained, you know, how a guy, he hasn't even got respect for a friend who he has taken out shopping, and he states very clearly, he brags about it, about how he came onto her very heavily and he tried to fuck her, and he came onto her like a bitch, he said, but she was married and she wouldn't have none of it. You know, imagine that, a friend. Oh, I'll take you shopping to get some furniture. But no, it's all just a ruse because he wants to fuck you. And you only find that out when you've agreed to go shopping with this friend of your own self and your husband. And that a person who's got so little loyalty, even to friends, can become president. You know, and that's what I mean. That psychology, that people can just ignore that, what he did, even to a married woman, a friend. You know, try to fuck a friend, okay? A couple that he was friends with, the wife of a couple who thought of him as friend, and she had to fight him off. And we think we can ignore that. We can ignore all this, but we can, you know, go absolutely crazy about the fact that women are deciding to terminate their pregnancies. Well, what a surprise. And as I say, we do need to wake up. This is a very, very serious issue, and for far too long, very, very serious issues related to women and children have been ignored. And, you know, this whole issue is further evidence of just how far down a dark path we will find ourselves once we start slipping into the imbalances of oligarchical rule.